Hi, everyone. It is my honor and pleasure to have Coach Moishe Chanin on my show today. He is here to talk to us about something very important, actually many, many important things. And I truly believe that listening to him share his story will enlighten you and inspire you on your own path. Moishe, thank you for coming on here on the show. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. This is an honor for many reasons, but I guess we'll talk about it over time.
Yes, for sure. So, Moishe, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
Okay. Um, who am I? That's actually most of everything I do. So I guess I'll put them both into the same thing. Now that I do the work and I think about who am I, it's very helpful for me to just say, this is going to sound very arrogant, I am God's expression of love here on earth. But my name is Moishe Chanin, and I was born in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, family of 11, very vibrant, loud family. And I'm currently 35, married to Chaya Chanin from the Frock. And we have 4 kids, thank God. And yeah, Baruch Hashem. And I had a journey in between the day I was born until today, and I'm happy to share my journey. What I do today is I coach people in identifying who they are and using who they are actually as a means and a source of energy to accomplish what they would love to accomplish here on earth while they're alive.
What inspires you to become a life coach?
It was a combination of many people throughout my adult life asking me whether I was a life coach or whether I was a therapist, because I just kind of like became that person, that friend. Mm-hmm. And it was a combination of that and trying it, trying to do it professionally. And once I started doing it professionally, I was just in love. Yeah.
Wow. When did you officially start becoming a life coach?
I think it was like 4 years ago. I started a coaching course with Chaya Abelsky. She has a coaching program called Infinity Coach Training, and it was a great training. And part of the training was to find myself some clients. And I did a Facebook post and wrote, "Hey friends, I want to be a life coach, and part of the training is that I need to coach people who want some free coaching." And the first person that responded became my first client, who eventually became my first paying client. Yeah.
Wow, beautiful. So can you tell us a little bit, let's go back a bit. Mm-hmm. You have been open about struggling with alcohol. You have shared many of your talks with your audience on YouTube and on your Instagram page. Can you tell us about can you tell us about your story about how you got into, unfortunately, alcohol and perhaps other substances?
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. So what's interesting is that alcohol was the level up from where I was earlier. And what it began as was stealing. That was my first drug of choice. And I think it would be most useful to the listener if we talk more about why I even started that in the first place.
Yeah.
And I could talk about what I felt without realizing that the way I felt was not normal and was something that I could ask for help for. And that same feeling that I felt back then when I was 6, 7 years old is the same feeling that I can feel today if I don't, let's quote unquote, do the work. And we could talk about what the work is.
Yeah.
The feeling is, I'm too scared to tell people how I feel, how I truly feel. I'm scared that they won't love me if I do. I'm scared that they will judge me. I'm scared that they will reject me. I don't feel like I'm part of everybody else. Seems like everybody else got the manual for life and I didn't. Seems like everybody has it together. Everybody has their talent and I have nothing. What's wrong with me? If only I had this, did this, accomplished that, then maybe I would fit in. And for me, it started with stealing. I knew that stealing was bad, which means I was stealing from my mother's pockets and my father's pockets, and then eventually graduating to shoplifting and buying things on my parents' credit account at the grocery store.
How old were you when you first started stealing?
I was 7.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was shoplifting also when I was 7. So I may have started stealing earlier than that, but I know for sure I was 7 when I was shoplifting because of what grade I was in. Yeah. Yeah, so that's when that began, but it also got cut short quickly because I got caught. I wasn't that slick, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And what that did for me was it got me to buy the things I thought I was lacking. So it got me to buy equality between me and peers at school because I got to compensate, because I was so low, I had to be a little bit better than everybody else just so that I can kind of feel just like them. So I would buy things in the credit account and that's how I would buy friends. And when I came home and I had money, I'd be able to chip in to buy whatever item it was that my family was chipping in to try to buy for the house. Buy the things that I wanted, that I thought that I just wanted, and I was too scared to ask for. Either too scared to ask for because I knew I was going to get a no, or because whatever it is that I wanted was something that was not allowed. Yeah, so it began with stealing, and then eventually I graduated to drinking when I was about 12, and I had friends having bar mitzvahs, and everybody was dancing, and that was like the event. So I would be able to do all these fun things on the dance floor, like acrobatic things and things like that. So the courage came from having a couple of drinks, which was just like, it was literally covering the bottom of these teeny little cups. And I would just take everybody's and drink it. And I don't remember alcohol being a problem at that time. I didn't see what I was doing as not normal. And I don't know if alcohol was a problem then. Like, I wasn't an alcoholic. I definitely love trying to get together as often as possible where there was a drink, very short, quickly, 12, 13, 14, I was drinking to the extent that people would see me drinking and be like, wow, man, this kid could drink and he's totally functional and he's not being wild and he knows how to hold his liquor, and glorifying that, oh wow, this kid can hold it. A significant moment happened for me when I was somewhere between 14 and 15, and it was a Shabbos afternoon, and I had used alcohol to be just like my friends again, right? So just like it was back in the day, it was stealing. Over here, it was my friends and I going out on Shabbos afternoon to find girls and say hi to them and be rebellious. And for them, for some reason, it seemed like it was so natural and easy. And for me, I was so turning inside. I just wanted to be okay. I just wanted to be normal. Why can't I just say hi to somebody? Why can't I just look somebody in the eyes and say good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom,
Yeah.
and
Right.
and this was anybody, but specifically for that, I really wanted that, and I wasn't able to do it. So without really, and I just want to be clear, like all of this was without like sitting and thinking it through. It was a natural subconscious, like a natural subconscious way of just thinking in a process that was just going to happen. I don't recall sitting there and thinking, I'm not confident. I'm going to go and I'm going to drink because, I feel less than. No, there was no self concept in that perspective, self
Right.
consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So I had about 2 bottles of wine, and nobody was around. I was just waiting for my friends to come over. And once they came over, I had already had this experience. And the experience was walking out of my bedroom, down the stairs, out my parents' house, and being able to see in color, kind of. Being able to hear the trees and the leaves moving. Being able to just notice things that I felt like I was seeing things in tunnel vision and in black and white all my life. And all of a sudden things are like this space, this openness. I'm able to see in like a panoramic view, and I'm able to say good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom to people and look at them in the eye and say hi, good Shabbos. There was like all of the noise and the filters were taken away, and I could finally embrace life. And that's when my friends came over. I don't remember what happened after that. I wasn't like a messy drunk whatsoever, and nobody noticed anything. I didn't tell anybody. But when I look back to think, like, when did I decide to become an alcoholic? I think it might have been that moment where I knew that alcohol would give me all of that experience. Yeah.
Wow.
And I was subconsciously seeking that experience.
Can I ask you something? You said that from an early age, 6 to 7 years old, you started having these feelings of like, you're not worthy, I'm not good enough, and all of these, feelings that showed a lack of self-esteem. Um, were you born like that? Where did that come from?
I
Like,
have no idea. I don't know.
was it that, you said you grew up in a big family with many siblings. Is this something that you saw, or is it something that like you got turned off by? Like, how do you think that
Yeah.
played out?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the truth. There are significant experiences that I had that that awakened a lot of shame and feelings of neglect and things like that. But I think that was even after then, after the age of 6 and 7. So I'm not sure exactly when that happened. Like as a kid, being called names. Um, that was probably the most significant thing that I can think about that was like traumatic for me. Um,
Were you
that's
able to
definitely,
were
yeah.
you able to share with like your family? Did your family know what was going on, or were they oblivious?
Um, they weren't oblivious to it happening, but they were oblivious to the extent of how deep it was hurting me and how deep I was hurting. And I did not have the courage, like I still can struggle with today, the courage to ask for help. I didn't, back then I didn't even know that there was this concept of having an adult in my life that I can just talk to. I just didn't have that. I don't recall having that. And that was my dream. If anybody looks me up on looks me up, whatever, looks up the first talk I did publicly, I talk about that. Having this fantasy of, you know, and this fantasy and this dream goes way back. Like I can't remember how far back it is, but it's this fantasy of crying, and finding a quiet place and crying, and somebody finding me and me sharing my heartache with them.
Hmm. Beautiful. So, okay, so this you discovered the power that alcohol gave you after this experience that you had, where you had this tunnel vision and you saw things and you felt like you never felt before. It actually reminds me of this show I'm watching, The Queen's Gambit. I highly recommend it. It's actually a fantastic show. I don't know if you saw it already. But it reminds me of that experience where like the tranquilizers that she was using and the alcohol was giving her this feeling that like she can't live without it. She's not powerful without it. She's not able to do anything without it. So when you, how long was this going for, and when was your breaking point?
Yeah. So from 14, 15, I began drinking more regularly. 16, 17, like I was drinking beer. I got introduced to like beer bongs, when I'm like 15, um, where it became a sport and a way to show off as well. That went on through 17, like all through my teenage years. I stayed away from all drugs. I had friends that had started drugs, and alcohol, I was just fine with alcohol. And when I was 19, I had made a pact with somebody that I would not smoke weed. When I was 18, I made that pact, but when I was 19 is when I reached out to this person. We made a pact that if we would ever smoke, we would do it together. And I was with two people I love dearly, and they were smoking. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. Oh, 1 second. I had this pact with somebody. I called that person. I got the green light. and I smoked some weed. And at first I was like, no, I'm not feeling anything. Did some more. And all of a sudden I just burst out into laughter. I laughed for a very, very long time, like for a few hours. And that's it. I was hooked. Like that freedom and that.
On weed.
On weed, yeah. Yeah. So it was that feeling that I had when I was like 13, like 14 or 15. I had an even more significant experience when I was 19 smoking weed. And well, I don't know if it was more significant, but it was like as significant, like 0 to 100.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And very quickly, I became a daily pot smoker. I tried stopping a few times, and it maybe lasted a week. And even when I tried stopping smoking weed, I still had alcohol all the time. I just want to be clear, like until there was one time that I told a friend, we were both sitting, we had like a massive bottle of Jack Daniels. We were sitting across each other on the table, and we were having like real deep, meaningful discussions, and we were composing a song. And I look at him and I say, man, we're alcoholics, and it wasn't like a degrading statement. It wasn't a self-degrading statement. For me at that time, it was like, we're just much more complicated and sophisticated and deep than anybody else we know. And this is where we live. This is where we shine, in this deep, dark place of art through music
Mm-hmm.
and words and wisdom. We're both sober today, actually. He's also sober. Yeah, he's about 7 years sober. He just celebrated 7 years sober.
Helpful.
Yeah. And that was the only time I ever recall saying that I'm an alcoholic. Other than that, until I was in rehab, I didn't see alcohol as a problem. The only thing I ever tried to stop was smoking weed.
That's interesting, Moshe, because in my eyes, alcohol is more harmful than weed. There's people who I know who smoke weed to like lower their blood pressure, to calm down, to relax. But I find that people who smoke weed every day, they don't really have like health issues. But people who drink alcohol every day do have health issues. Actually, people smoke weed or, have marijuana because they have a health issue and they want to like lower their stress levels or help them cope with the pain. So it's interesting that you wanted to stop smoking weed, but not alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just want to mention one thing. I think your mic is getting scratched on your thing. And
Of course it is. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I move a lot when I talk.
Um, yeah, I can just speak for myself. Like, I'm not going to talk about weed, and I'm not going to take a stance in politics around what weed is and what it does and what it doesn't. But what I can tell you is that I recognize that it's an issue. Um, there were times where I would, when I was 18, 19, no, I was 20, 21. Like, there was times when I would run out of weed, and while nobody was looking, I'd be on my knees on the floor, combing through the threads of a carpet to try to find some weed and put it together so that I can smoke it. So I was addicted. I would take, there's one of the ways of smoking is using a slide and a bottle and a bong, whatever, at least for anybody who's been in Israel, they know exactly what I'm talking about. I would scrape that out, dry it up, and like, I don't want to give anybody ideas, but it was so bad. It was so disgusting. Um, but I needed it. I personally was addicted to marijuana. I know people can say that that's not possible.
Right,
Uh,
exactly. People say you
uh,
can't be addicted to marijuana. It's harmless.
right,
Oh, I smoke it like once a week. No big deal. Once a
right.
month.
So I want to be clear. Like, I have absolutely nothing against alcohol. I have nothing against weed. I just know that my experience smoking it was pretty sad. In the beginning it was nice. I had a great time. There were some times where I spent literally hours laughing with friends. I had great times. I don't regret that. But it brought me to my knees, like they say. It made me do things that I risked. Like, I spent the night in prison because I got caught one time. Um, and it brought me to my knees, and it made me do things that were morally against what I believe was the right thing. Like, when income came in for when I had my wife and my two kids, and I would spend the money on my weed before I paid for groceries. There's something wrong with that, you know and most importantly is what happened to me when I didn't have it. What bubbled up? And what bubbled up was all those same feelings. But as I got older, it wasn't just feeling not part of and feeling less than. It also came up with tremendous resentment and shame and guilt, which were probably the three most powerful feelings that I would get
When you were off it.
when I was off it. So if I just take a couple of puffs, I would smoke a lot, but when I would smoke and I would drink, all of a sudden I became a very nice person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something? So you were having these issues for quite some time, and then you got married. I mean, you got engaged, you got married. You got engaged, you got married, and did your wife at the time know
Yeah. Yeah.
about your issues?
Yeah. So she knew about that. She knew about other issues as well, which made it very difficult for her to even agree to marry me. That was like a big part of that. Which, I don't know. I guess if you interview her one day, you'll hear that whole part of the
Yes.
story.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very significant. Um, I've promised many times that I would stop, and I really, 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 really meant it. And I stopped, and then there were times I just watched my body go and do things that I was like, no, 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 don't do that. And every time that would happen, it would make me feel more and more ashamed, more and more um, hopeless.
Did you feel that, oh, I'm going to get married now, I'm going to have kids, so it's going to be better. I'm going to be better. I'm not going to need alcohol. I'm not going to need weed. I have everything. Did you
Right.
ever
So I
think that
think
way?
I I think I don't recall 100%, but I imagine that I thought that just with marriage, though. I'm going to be with this person that I love. She's going to complete me, and I will never need to use again. Um, but after that, it was all having my kids were more. Here is going to be the reason that's going to empower me to make a decision that I wasn't able to before. Having a kid, wow, I'm for sure going to stop for that. I'm going to for sure do it when my wife gets pregnant. And I'm for sure going to do it when she gives birth. And I'm for sure going to do it when the second time she gets pregnant. And I'm for sure going to do it when I go to Australia and we're stuck on the plane for 24 hours. So I'm kind of clean, even though just I'm drinking all this time. I'm going to be clean already for 24 hours. So let me use it as a springboard to begin, getting off weed. And I just fall every time. And it was devastating every time because the amount of courage and the amount of courage that it took for me to even be willing to try to stop was so much. So every time I'd disappoint myself and become a failure, made it even more painful, which means more pain, more weed, more pain, more drinking, more pain, more shame, all that.
Mm-hmm. How did you break the cycle?
I broke the cycle by one night expressing that I did not want to live anymore. And I ended up being driven to a psychiatric ward where I detoxed for 7 days, no alcohol, no weed. And I was locked in there, so I couldn't do anything about it. And when I was there, there was I'm remembering him. No, I'm just remembering his face. I remember being with him. So Jack Masry, I met him there, and all of a sudden, he single-handedly at that moment saved my life by convincing me to go to rehab. He gave me a sense of belonging in a place where it's almost impossible to feel that unless you're on enough meds. He shared with me some things, and there was a certain language that we spoke that I don't recall ever having a conversation with somebody that I really, really, really felt understood. And coming from a place that he understood me, and he also had more experience than me, even though my family were begging me to go to rehab, from that conversation, he convinced me to go to rehab. And I went to rehab, and that's where I learned that I was also an alcoholic as well as a drug addict. I was scared to say a drug addict. I was scared to say that I was just smoking, because I was thinking, a drug addict. I'm just a pothead, I actually, in the beginning, they used to say, people would introduce themselves when we were in group, in the large group, when the entire rehab was together. They had lectures, so people would introduce themselves. I would say, my name is Moishe and I'm a pothead. And I didn't look at marijuana as a drug. It's just pot. So it took time for me. I was even ashamed in rehab to say that I'm a drug addict, Anyway, so I learned that, I learned in rehab that I'm not a bad person. I don't have to feel ashamed. Addiction is very powerful, and it is a disease. And what I'm running away from really is restlessness, irritability, and discontentness. And to feel those three feelings, those things, including shame and rejection, are just too painful for me. And I was self-medicating. I needed a medicine. People have headaches, they're in physical pain, they take Tylenol. I felt in emotional pain, I took my medicine. And I was introduced to a new way to live, a new way to relieve myself of that pain. And it started with having support groups and therapy and working through my pain and my traumas and the things that I held, that I was ashamed of.
How long were you in rehab for?
It was 30 days. Most people in my group were recommended to stay for longer. If I were to give it any credit to why it was only 30 days, it's probably because I really participated. I took risks and I shared things. And I also had a plan for when once I left, which included an intensive outpatient, a family that supported me, a wife that supported me, a community, like even the shul I would go to, which I actually founded. I'll take a little bit of credit for that.
Beautiful.
The rabbi came to visit me in rehab. He drove 3.5 hours each way to be at rehab for about 45 minutes to sit with me and a few counselors so that they can give him a little bit of like a prep work for what happens when I leave and I come home. And the first Shabbos that I came back from rehab, the entire show, there was no alcohol. Some people were pretty upset. And I actually told them, it's okay, you don't need to do that for me. I really appreciate it, but you don't need to do that for me. But you're talking about, at the time we were probably like, I don't know, 50, 60 men, it was a pretty big show and pretty big synagogue. And we drank a lot. So for them to do that was very significant and I appreciated it. So before I left rehab, I already had all this support set up for me. So they were confident that I'd be okay.
What would you advise people who, after they go to rehab and they come back, because, there's so many instances of people relapsing, and then they have to go back to rehab and they come back home and they relapse again, go back to rehab. So what would you suggest for people to do after rehab?
Yeah.
So that they don't relapse?
I'll be happy to. What I'll suggest to you is what I did, and what I did was staying sober became my number one priority, which means I went to my place of work on the first day after I came back from rehab, and I had a meeting with, it was a family member, nevertheless, the person that I would work with who had a decision to make. And I said, my sobriety is number one, which means 3 times a week I'm going to be leaving work to go to my intensive outpatient. Every single day I'm going to be going to a 12-step meeting. Sometimes it's going to be during the day, sometimes it's going to be in the evening. But this is what I need in order for me to stay sober. Are you okay with that? If you are, great, then I'm staying. If you're not okay with that, that's okay, I'm leaving. And I was very blunt, and that's what I said. And he said, yeah, it's okay, stay, let's do this. So sobriety has to be number one. Yeah, I can't tell you how many people, you know what? Most people come back from rehab and they relapse, and the good rehabs, the whole story is a sad story. I'm not going to get into the whole discussion, but like 90% of people who come out of rehab relapse. So
then why?
So why are we going to rehab?
Solution? Yeah. Why do people go to rehab if 90% relapse? Are there better solutions? Is it that rehab only treats the disease and not the person?
No, I think it's, they work with the person. I think we could spend like a 2.5-hour podcast just on that concept.
Okay.
If somebody asks me whether they should go to rehab or not today, I would tell them to go to rehab.
Of course.
It's 100% better than just trying to do it on our own. I know many people who have done it on their own, which means on their own means that they detoxed. If it was just from minor drugs, not from benzos, because those people can get seizures from when they're just detoxing. It's very dangerous, as well as alcohol. It's very important, depending on how much alcohol the person's drinking. It's important for them to go to a detox. So yeah, I know people who have detoxed and they go to 12-step meetings and they're sober today. I know some people who were sober for 14 years and 20 years and 13 years. And when I say these numbers, I'm picturing somebody. Yeah. So, and these are people who never went to rehab.
They went to AA meetings. Just by going to AA meetings.
Yeah. Now, it's not just going to AA meetings. It's not like they just show up to the gym and they look at everybody else working out and they're like, okay, this is fun. This is nice. I feel healthy. I'm dressed up like everybody else. So I'm probably somebody who's fit. No, that's not the way it works. There's work to be done. And that's a little bit alluding to what I was saying earlier, the work, right? We can talk about that.
Yeah. So can you talk about what this work is? Is it inner work? Is it work that you need to do with another person? Is it both? Yeah, if you can talk about that.
Yeah. So I love talking about this. That's the truth. Awesome. It's everything. Yeah. I love talking about this. The more I do the work And the more I learn about it, the more I realize that it's like everything that I've been taught, like therapy, 12 steps, Torah, it's all the same. They're all trying to tell us the same thing. If you want to have a good life, admit where you have a challenge. Be clear about what it is you're trying to cover up. And work on it. Whatever it is that you're trying to cover up. And then you'll be free, So in the 12 steps, it's like admitting that we're powerless over alcohol, and then believing that I did this help for it, and then taking an inventory to seeing what are the character defects. Because you could ask a question like, hey, I'm here to quit alcohol. What the heck are you talking to me about? God and character defects like fear and resentment and harms done to others, and part of the inventory is like a sexual inventory. Like, what the heck does that have to do with my drinking or my drug use? The answer is because let's go back to why am I using in the first place? And what I'm using in the first place, really, what it comes down to is almost always it comes down to fear. Mm-hmm. It all comes down to fear. And when I heard somebody say that fear is like maggots or like mushrooms. When they're exposed to the sunlight, when they're exposed to the light, they disappear. I actually, when I did my first talk publicly, the first thing I did was I voiced all of my fears. That was the first thing I did. That would be one of the ways of doing the work. Like, hi guys, thank you so much for having me. I am scared that you will all judge me. I'm scared of what you will look at me like when I see you in the supermarkets or on the streets. So yeah, exposing the fear. So that's why part of the fifth step, the 12 steps, is talking about sharing it with somebody else. Yeah, and then the sixth and seventh is already asking God to remove them. So which means that there's a God in my life, and then there's making amends to others if I've harmed them, and then there's being of service and having that connection with God. Which, if I go back and I see like what's the whole point? The whole point of the 12 steps, in my opinion, in my experience, is to me the way I am while I'm addicted, while I'm in active addiction. And I'll talk about what active addiction can be in sobriety also, and anybody is an addict when it comes to this. But when I'm in active addiction, I am powerless. The person who I identify as being is powerless. Me on my own, because every time I saw myself, I swore it off. I promised it off. I did everything, and I kept going back to it. So I knew that there was this was just much bigger than me, much more powerful than me. And then through having a conscious contact with a higher power, which means that if there's anything that tells me that I am not deserving of God's love, if there is anything that I am angry at God for, those are the things that are going to separate me. And if fear is my problem, then faith is my solution.
That's beautiful.
So I, who is separate from God, is powerless, but the I who is in contact with God is powerful, because my power is not coming from me, the isolated me, the selfish, self-centered me. It comes from the selfless me. The less self there is, the more God's presence there is, which means the less selfishness there is, the more service there is. And just like from a very physical, practical perspective, is that when I am of service to others, everything that my soul or my heart needed that I was searching for in alcohol, I get from being of service to others.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So that's just the 12 steps. But think about it in Judaism, like that's the same thing. We, 70, 80 years, I think it was the Baal Shem Tov that said 70, 80 years, and the Shema comes down here just to do a favor for somebody else. We're here to be of service to others. We're here to love. We're here to be of service to others. And there's some trauma or some sort of experience in our life tells us that we need to start turning inwards and becoming protective of ourselves and focus on ourselves. The more we focus on ourselves, the more isolated we become, the more self-centered we become, not from a negative trait, but simply from a perspective of survival, you know?
Wow, blown away. That's beautiful. That's really the essence of Judaism. You see so many similarities between the, ideology of the AA meetings and Judaism, the essence of Judaism. It's about being there for others. It's not an isolated religion. It's not a religion where you go to the mountains and your retreats and you're all alone. It's all about helping other people and seeing the godliness in
Right.
others.
Yeah, which there is space for going and doing hisbodedut and isolating oneself to a certain point. And the purpose of the isolation and the purpose of the hisbodedut is contemplation. We're talking about like meditation, and these things are really there as a tool to bring me back to be more useful to others.
Yeah.
Because if I'm just sitting there and I go onto the top of a mountain somewhere and I spend my entire life there, how useful am I to others?
Exactly.
What a waste of an incredible human being.
Yeah, exactly. Moishe, can you tell us what are some things that Jewish communities could do to help with addiction issues or people even getting there to that point?
Yeah.
Or is this something that we can all do collectively to help this problem, especially nowadays, because it's not just addiction to alcohol and drugs. Now there's addiction to our smartphones, there's pornography, food, there's so many different things, gambling. Is there anything that you can think of that Jewish communities can do?
Yeah, I think it would be the exact thing that I was saying. So I think it's going to take a little bit, so I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant now. So if you want to stop me at any point,
Okay,
feel
no
free to
problem.
stop me and ask a question.
Yeah.
There's a great clip. It was a TED Talk. His name is escaping me.
Oh, I
The
think I
title
know.
is, you for sure know it. The title is Everything You Think You Know About Addiction Is Wrong. And
Johan, Dr.
Johan
Johan.
Hari,
Yeah.
yes. So he talks about how the opposite of addiction is connection. And then actually I just posted a clip of what I was watching last night. And, the point is that it's not, we focus so much on the symptom and we forget about the cause. 99% of all of our efforts is looking at our loved one or ourselves in the mirror and say, what the heck is wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? And it's not what's behind this, but it's based on a premise that there is something wrong with me. And the thing that's wrong with me is the fact that I take drugs or I drink alcohol or I watch pornography or I eat too much or I can't control myself. I have impulses I keep doing. The problem is not the problem. The problem is not the medicine that I'm taking, because it is a medicine. And somebody may say, how dare you call such immoral behaviors medicine? Well, let's think about it. What happens to the person when they stop doing it? And what happens is they start feeling a certain emotional, almost always an emotional pain. So the problem is the emotional pain. So let's work on the emotional pain. And the greatest antidote, the greatest medicine for emotional pain that literally can knock out 50% of the painful experience of emotional pain is connection and having someone to talk to, somebody that really understands me. Which I started asking my question, why is that so significant? Why is it so significant for someone to understand me? And and what I found was that when I have connection here on earth, then there's a place for me here on earth. when I have a connection with somebody else and they're like, yes, I saw this great clip. Oh, it's so good. I only saw half of it, but it's about this guy that validates people, validated, you know, you know, feeling validated is saying that there's a place for me on earth and I matter,
Mm-hmm.
I matter to this person, even though I think I don't deserve to matter, even though I think that, there was a time that night that I wanted to kill myself. I was thinking that not only do I not deserve any of the good I have in life, but I was a burden and I would be relieving those who love me by no longer being around. They would be so much better off, right? So the question is like, how do I do that? I'm a parent. I'm a wife, a husband. You know, it starts with ourselves. I think that's where it starts. I used to think it starts with others, but I don't know. I guess it can both happen at the same time. But what I've learned in my coaching is that the best place to begin changing other people's lives is by changing our own. And when I look inside myself and I see parts of myself that I don't like, how do I behave? How do I react? And this goes into a lot of the therapy that I've done, which is the IFS model, internal family systems. So I'll do something, or I'll behave a certain way, or I'll react to something that a certain way, and I will start judging my reaction. Again, asking that same question, like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be okay with something? And then there are many people that I meet that have adopted that voice of, call it the inner critic, right? So I'll do a certain behavior, let's call it smoking weed for now, right? So let's say I was smoking weed, and then a part of me was saying, like, what's wrong with you? Just stop. You promised so many times, what's wrong with you, right? You keep doing. I was smoking weed on Shabbos. Like, I was doing things that were really against things that I believed. And so I was beating myself up. And then at a certain point, what happens is that we almost forget about the fact that we're doing the behavior. We're just hurting so much by this inner critic, and then we start hating the inner critic, right? So we have a critic of the critic. I wish this voice in my head would just stop beating me up. So if this voice, why do I want this voice to stop beating me up? Because I just want to be okay. I want to be seen as valid. I want to be seen as somebody who's just going through a painful experience. I just want to be seen as that, as innocent. So then I criticize my critic. And that criticizing the critic can literally go 7, 8 layers of criticizing the critic, and then judging that critic, and then judging that critic, and then judging that critic. I meet some people that are in such deep emotional pain, and the more layers of criticizing the critic that there is, the deeper that they are and hopeless they feel. So how do I start accepting myself? How do I turn the process back? How do I turn it around and start loving myself? And what happens is, I don't know, this is just the way I use it in my coaching, but I'm certain that this is all, I see it as being what I've been taught in 12 steps and what I was taught in therapy. I just never saw it, but it's 5 words. Find the love to freedom. Okay.
Find the love to freedom.
Yeah. When I find the love, I become free. So at a certain point, I start questioning, why is it that I beat myself up? But not from a accusing perspective, more of like a curious perspective. Mm-hmm. I wonder, like that's the key word. I wonder why I beat myself up. And the answer always comes that I care. The only reason why I would criticize is if I care. And my question is, where does caring come from? The only way I would care about something is if I love it. right? So that's finding the love. So if I could find the love at the bottom of everything, that helps me it sets me free. Because once I find, let's say if I'm 9 layers in and I look at the thing next to me, it's always easier to find the love with the most outer critic, right? Because that's the closest, it's almost like it's the closest thing to me. Oh, this is my buddy. I had actually envisioned the idea of like me putting my arm over the critic right next to me who was standing up for me, or standing up for, call it, my inner child, because he was criticizing my critic. He was like kind of on my team, but at the end of the day, he was criticizing another part of me, right? So on one hand, he was doing something that's painful, but on the other hand, he was standing up for me. So I'm able to find the love in that. And when I'm able to find the love in that, I'm able to put my arm over its shoulder and say, hey, thank you for looking out for me. I really appreciate it. I won't necessarily voice, I don't really appreciate that you're hurting a part of me, but I do appreciate where you're coming from. So thank you for being here for me. I love you.
Wow, this is.
And I work my way back. Layer after layer after layer. And it almost like flips through all 9 layers very quickly to that one critic that beats me up the most, the loudest, most common one, the one that's up before me in the morning, and as soon as I wake up tells me that I'm a piece of who knows what. And I'm able to love that part of me. And when I love that part of me, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm going to say it in a few different words, but there's a soul here. I don't have to be the parent anymore. I don't have to be the critic anymore. I don't have to be that employee that's been stepping up while the CEO has left and been on vacation for 6 months and is telling everybody what to do. I don't have to be anything else anymore. I'm just perfectly okay. This is called self-parenting. This is called whatever. There's so many different terms that people call this. But that's what I see it as, find the love. When I find the love, all of a sudden I'm free. And the question is, what really frees me is what I go back, like what was the 12 steps and Judaism is like, who is the one that's finding the love? Who is the me that's finding the love? Who is the one that is curious? Who is the one that put my arm over the other part of me? Understanding who I am as being that. There's so much comfort. There's so much hope that comes from that. Oh, I'm not a bad person. I'm really this good person that's been hijacked or has been, not present, has been covered up by so many layers and layers of klipot, right? Who's covering over my soul. I don't know, this is just my understanding of it today. So 12 steps, it's an uncovering process of understanding that there is a God within me. That's my understanding. Some people call it all these different things, what their higher power is. But for me, it's uncovering the God within me that knows and doesn't, and like when I'm faced with indecision and I don't know what to do, what I'm really doing is I stop and I pray. But what I'm really doing is I'm covering the inner knowing within me. And maybe the thing that's within me, which is I call my neshama, my soul, really knows. But maybe what it knows is that I'm supposed to ask somebody else for advice.
That's beautiful, Moshe.
But that's within me, yeah.
Back to the question, I know the question about how we can, as a community, help people not fall into addiction. And your answer, which was so complex, but I really I broke it down into, it starts with us, but we also need others. We have to be able to face ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and really, really be in touch, with ourselves, our inner core. At the same time, being able to ask for help. And, what you're doing is very, revolutionary. I don't know too many men who do this inner work. I grew up knowing that men don't cry, boys don't cry. Men have to be tough. We don't talk about feelings. So how did you get okay with being vulnerable and making other men comfortable with all their emotions
Yeah.
besides anger and happiness? You know, because I think sadness in a lot of men is disguised as anger. You know, anger disguises the sadness.
Mhm.
So if you have a message for the men listening to this podcast, hopefully, um, how is it okay to feel all your emotions and still be a man?
Thank you. Um, I think I'm not sure if I've seen it anywhere, but I believe in this thing called normalizing vulnerability. If you haven't seen it, please take a look at what Brene Brown talks about vulnerability. There are 2 TED Talks and a Netflix episode. Vulnerability. Vulnerability is the process of taking down the walls that separate me from you. If I want to feel true love, if I want to feel true oneness, if I want to embrace life itself, I have to take down my walls. Yes, I need walls in order to protect me. That is true. But there are those that I am willing to invite into my home. And there are those who are willing to invite me into their home, into their sacred space. You know, if I took the Sefer Torah and I just kept it locked in the safe all year round, what type of connection would I have with the Sefer Torah? There comes a day of which I take all the Sefer Torahs out of the Aron Kodesh and I dance with them, whether they are puzzle, whether they are or have a defect or they don't. I dance with all of them. There comes a day where I need to open up and celebrate all of who I am. So if you're looking for a source in Torah, you got one. If you're, you know, when we're stuck in these emotions, it's just, I feel so much compassion for that because I was there. I held in those emotions for so many years. And the walls that protect me imprison me. As soon as those walls are a constraint, that's the day when it's important for me to find somebody I trust and share something with them. And it's a risk. Yes, it's a risk. For me, 100% of the time that I reached out to somebody who was emotionally healthy, I was embraced with love, acceptance, and compassion. 100% of the time. There were a few times, actually, there's only one time that I can think of that I reached out to somebody who I was looking for their compassion. I was looking for their validation of my pain as a way of comforting myself, but they just weren't ready for that and they weren't emotionally healthy. So that's when I felt that rejection. Those were the times where I can provide that for myself. You know, oh wow, there's a part of me that really needs, maybe I can provide that for myself, but not through trying to get somebody else to validate me, but maybe to recognize that I have that issue and maybe speak to a therapist, somebody who is much more emotionally available. Yeah.
Moshe, can you tell us some of your hopes and dreams for the world?
My hopes and dreams are that every person go through this process, or not even need to go through this process, but experience this liberation of an inner innocent pursuit of loving. And from that place, there's so much more light that can be in the world. And I believe that that is the purpose of why God created the world in the first place. He wanted to have a place to live here on earth. And I believe that that is the purpose of why we were created. There's a world of which we go against the current. You know, the current is self-centeredness and survival, and if I give you, I have less. And the way we reveal godliness here is by providing that inner healing for ourselves. You know, within ourselves, it says that each person is like a Beis Hamikdash, and they have their Kodesh HaKodashim, right? we can bring the light of God, acceptance, and love within ourselves. I always say, like, the darkest place in the world of where I need to bring light is in my head. And I say that because just a very simple example is that when I go through, if I go into a dark alleyway or if I'm fearing something, my mind will make it 10 times darker than whatever the darkness is. So I know that my mind is for sure the darkest place. So if I can bring acceptance and love to my mind, that will be really, really fulfilling my purpose here on earth, which is to bring light to the darkness. And if I bring light to the darkness to myself, I'll be so much more fit to bring light to the darkness of somebody else, give them the love and acceptance that they need. Because usually the defect that we see in others is really a reflection of the defect we see in ourselves. I judge others because I'm judging myself as that.
Blown away. I was trying to hold my tears back in this interview. I mean, this has been after a very tumultuous month for me, as you know. And just everything you were speaking about really touched me in many ways. I just think so many people are living within their walls, stuck in their self-centeredness, living according to this, everything revolves around me, you know? And what you spoke about, you're sharing your story with us, was truly liberating. I mean, what you went through and how you came out of it and are continuing to come out of that and help other people is truly, truly inspiring. And I want to thank you for being here, sharing your story, being vulnerable with the audience, with me, and helping other people. Where can people find you?
I don't know, anywhere. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I have a website called, which
Oh,
I
I didn't
haven't
know.
updated in a while. I don't even know. It's probably misinformation by now. Chewablegoals.com. Yeah, because we take on too big and then we
Oh, beautiful.
heard
Awesome.
somebody say that it's worse to take on small goals and achieve them. I disagree with that. Yeah, I disagree with that.
I think I
Look,
too.
I have this concept that actually I've been challenged to write on, and it's the title is "With Room to Grow." You know, I'm perfect just the way I am, with room to grow. I want to have happiness with room to grow. I want to have all these things, right? Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Moishe. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.